WeenCast, a Ween podcast with Rory Gibbons and Shane Prutzky.
Hey, what's up? This is Shane.
And this is Rory.
And this is WeenCast. And we welcome you to a new episode.
Welcome, everybody.
So,
hope everyone's having a great evening.
Absolutely. So, Rory and I were looking at the announcement for the Riot Fest concert festival in September in Chicago, and Ween is playing and performing the full album of the Mollusk, and it sort of got us to thinking and talking about the Mollusk and the time period, and realizing, first of all, that it's actually past 20 years, because the album came out in 1997, but it's been 22 years since the Mollusk debuted. And also we came across an article from Stereo Gum, I believe, which was really cool and something I had not seen before. It is actually from 2 years ago when the Mollusk turned 20. And it's a collection of paragraphs from Diener talking about the making of the Mollusk, and a lot of cool shit that we had never heard before, we had never known about before. So we wanted to sort of do sort of like an album review and just sort of like discussion about the album The Mollusk and why it keeps sort of coming up and coming back again and again and again.
Yeah, just, being sentimental about the Mollusk. It was actually a Facebook friend of mine, Ryan, who let me know about this Riot Fest, because Ween was on there doing the Mollusk. And then because he pointed that in my direction, he then shared that article with me, and I had never seen that article before either. And so I was reading that, and it was really cool to, we had, several podcasts ago done, sort of ranked our top 3 to 4 albums, and the Mollusk made the top for both of us. And so we had talked about it and for that podcast, and it was just interesting reading the article and learning all this stuff about how the album came to be, and straight from the mouth of Mickey was awesome, because it helped inform what I understood about the album and whatnot that I hadn't known before. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, like you said, it's not, the 20th anniversary was 2 years ago, so the article, of course, is not brand new. But this whole Riot Fest thing sort of brought it out, that they were going to be doing the Mollusk album in its entirety. So why not? That's a fitting reason to take a closer look at at that album, and especially how maybe what we learn in that article kind of informs how we understand the music.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that I will say when reading that article and just thinking about the time period, Ween was just incredibly prolific at that time in the mid to late 90s. I mean, right in the beginning of the article, Diener talks about how they basically made that and the country album sort of at the same time. They made those back to back. And I mean, it's just amazing to think about the fact that the 12 Golden Country Rates comes out in 1996. The Mollusk comes out in 97. I mean, both of those albums within the span of 2 years, I mean, that's just amazing. I mean, most bands, it's 2-3 years or more in between albums. And then it's maybe some of them are good and some of them aren't, or whatever. The fact that both of those amazing records come out within the span of a year, it's just incredible, really. And
it's like the Beatles, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's,
Yeah.
Something like that. It's boom, boom, right on top of each other. It really helps you appreciate that they were really at the height of their creative powers and just output young and just rocking and rolling all the time and just like constantly making new music and like writing and playing.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I remember, I don't even have the dates pulled up, but I remember when we made our episode about going to see the Mollusk show, the Mollusk World Tour show in Philadelphia, which was in January of '98. That was like at the end of the Mollusk tour. So that album comes out in June of '97. And I'm pretty sure they had just played like that entire year of shows. So it's like the entire year of '97 is just them on tour to support the Mollusk. So it's like, you got the country album, the country band tour, and then immediately the following year, the Mollusk and a complete, world tour to support it. So, I mean, they were just like seriously hitting the road, like you said, writing and recording, and just out there playing the shows like fucking crazy at that time. And it's just an amazing time period for the band. One of the other things that is sort of shored up in that article we had mentioned on our previous podcast talking about that particular show, the Mollusk World Tour show. That was the sort of like time when they formed the 5-piece band that the live show would become. And still is to this day. That's really
that's them like in that formative time, like playing together as a unit, and it's amazing that that's the music they're putting together at the beginning of their formation. It's almost like a black hole, it's like the Big Bang, it's like everything's really explodes all at the moment of creation. And it's amazing that the Mollusk is like is how they sort of started with the 5-piece band. And it's interesting how in the article how Mickey tells the history of the Mollusk and how that's not really how it was recorded. They didn't all 5 just like hang out together for like a month at like down the shore in Jersey. And so there's all these different layers to how it was made. But that's the beginning of the 5-piece band. And then and going on the road to support that, like, and playing like constantly that year. It's amazing that that's such an amazing album comes out of like the beginning of that formation, which is what everyone knows as Ween since then. I mean, at this point, that's been more than 20 years, right?
Yeah. So it's like not only does that album withstand the test of time and holds up over 20 years later, but that would be the band that they would put together. That would be it for the next 20 years up till now. So it's not only Giner and Diener, but also Dave, Glenn, and Claude. So it's like that is really when they like came together. Now I think they had worked with Claude and Dave a little bit, but previous to like that time period, it's Andrew Weiss is on bass, and that article sort of talks about Diener sort of saying they separated themselves from him because it was just too much on him, and them sort of like taking it back to like, okay, we'll write the songs and record them, and we'll get your input like afterwards, like that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's just like incredible that is the era when that band is really put together for like the live show, and it still is those 5 guys to this day. So it's like,
yeah, and I remember seeing the name Andrew Weiss like on like Chocolate and Cheese, and other albums and whatnot, and I never knew, and then I knew that it disappeared off there, and then the 5, but I never really had the context of that. The article, by the way, is called Ween's The Mollusk Turns 20, An Oral History by Mickey Melchiondo. Or is it Melchiondo? I don't know. I actually don't know. By Drew,
it's just Diener, man. It's fucking Diener.
By Drew Fortune. And just to get that out there to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, and I don't want to, people can go out and read the article at stereogum.com, which they should. So I don't want to repeat the whole thing. But it's kind of, I got the sense that Andrew Weiss was just such a big part of the band prior to that. But as far as like the production and like, but maybe it was almost like it was supposed to be Diener and Giner you know, and not Diener, Jeaner, and Andrew. And it sort of grew out of that to be like, you know, we want to be Jeaner and Diener leading a band. And we can't do that if Andrew Weiss is still a part of it. Because he'll be doing too much of the integral stuff while not being like one of the Diener and Jeaner. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I got out of it is like, you know, I think that they really like looked up to him and admired him for like the production end of it. But as having him as the bass player maybe was a little bit too much in terms of like, okay, now, you know, he's really steering the ship in like all different directions now in every way. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of one of those like, you know, if you're not really on the inside, you don't know really how it went down kind of thing. So it's like, okay, you know, whatever. We'll just take a step back and say, okay, that's just how it happened, whatever. That's between those guys, you know. But the thing that I found interesting, and I always knew that, you know, this was supposedly made down at the Jersey Shore, you know, okay, well, this is the album that we made at the Jersey Shore, you know, that kind of thing. But you have to admire the sort of like artists' process of this is what we're going to have to do to like get away from it all and like work on this album. You know what I mean? And like, I think that's probably why a lot of musicians and a lot of bands start to like Wayne after a while, because they don't have the discipline as Ween did at this period in their career, which is basically just to say like, we are going to do nothing but work on these songs, and we're going to
we're going to
have
go down here 5 days a week or whatever, and we're going to go down there 5 days a week, and we're going to just work on these songs.
Right.
And just stay down there, you know. And it's like, you're right on to talk about the discipline, and that's something that I think often gets underestimated with Ween, that they're actually like, you know, great artists and like work at their craft. And I think what goes into this album is exactly that, you know. And you have to do that. It's like, look, we're gonna go and we're gonna, you know, put ourselves away. We're not just gonna go in our basement, you know, and like where we have all these distractions and everything, and just like work on it. We're gonna go and put ourselves somewhere where we can get this done.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Jersey Shore in the off season is a quiet place. It's like Deadsville, because it's beach towns, and it's like Jersey, so it's summer beaches. You know, it's like Memorial Day to Labor Day. It's like busy and crazy and party time. But then the off season, it's really dead, and especially in the middle of the off season, it's really, really dead.
Right.
But are you sure? I wasn't sure exactly where they were. Were they down in Cape May? Because he mentions they're down at the end of the island, or were they on a different island?
Man,
and I know they were like an hour from Atlantic City.
I always kind of assumed it's like Long Beach Island. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But I don't like that. You know, you're talking, that's a gray area for me, man. I don't know.
Because he was just saying it just ends and there's nothing, and then it's just the boulevard.
Yeah, like I'm familiar with like,
which one.
You know, you mentioned Cape May. I'm familiar with that like area, but there's an entire other like Jersey Shore, which I consider to be sort of like the New York Jersey Shore. You know?
Yeah, north of Atlantic City.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So it's like
versus the Philly side.
Yeah, like right, exactly. So like that, I don't know, but I think anywhere you go in the Jersey Shore, you're right on the money. Is basically, it's like after, you know, Labor Day, you know, maybe there's a couple more weeks where there's still like people hanging around and whatnot, and then it's just like, you know, 95% of the people, you know, they go home, they go back to their regular houses, and they're not back again until, you know, spring, early summer. So it's a really dead, you know, sort of quiet place. And
yeah, it's dead and quiet, and when there's weather, you're out on an island. And I know that it's a town and all, but when there's no one around because it's the off season, and and there's a storm, you know, it can be pretty rugged out there. You know, it's definitely an interesting experience to be, you know, out on a barrier island, basically, like in the winter. You know, and no one's around, and it's like a storm out there, and you almost like you're like surrounded by the ocean. You almost feel like, you know, and that's what kind of permeates the album. But what I find interesting is that it wasn't like intentional. It's not like they went into it being like, we're gonna rent a place down the shore and we're gonna write a nautical album. They just sort of rented it down the shore. That's like a convenient that there's awesome reasons to do that if you live in New Hope, or somewhere in that area, because it's not that far. It's like an hour to 2 hours max, kind of depending on like where you're going on the shore.
Yeah.
So it's a close place to get a getaway.
Mm-hmm.
And in the off season, it's going to be an affordable place to do a getaway. So it makes a lot of sense that you would do that. And it's quiet, so there's a lot of good reasons to do it, and then you get there and you're like, oh shit, Aaron brought along, folk music of like, the 16th to 17th hundreds of like England and stuff, and then of the British Isles, and next thing you know, they're recording Cold Blows the Wind, and that's sort of setting the flavor that sort of permeates it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, and I always thought that it was way more intentional from the start, that it was like the nautical theme.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting to me that that's not the case. That it like sort of came logically from the circumstances, but it came organically, I think,
right,
is what Mickey's telling of the history kind of tells me. And that's awesome. And that's like the creative process.
Yeah.
Like, let's go off and do this and make this happen. And this is what you get. I just think that's, and I also think it's like mind blowing, and it's like so brilliant that like when Ween goes off and does the creative process, the Mollusk is what you get.
I mean, at this time in their career, you can definitely tell that when they put their heads together, no pun intended, when they are actually like working on something, that they can really turn out some cool fucking shit. And this is a prime example of that. You got you could say the same thing with like the pod / Pure Guava. It's like, okay, well, they live together in the pod, and but that I kind of see more as like okay, well, we're working on music in between, like partying and that kind of stuff, and then the whole mononucleosis thing. But but it's like the Mollusk, you can tell when you read an article like this and a little bit of the background, that it's like they were determined to make this, and they were not fucking around.
Yeah, dude, it's got a cohesive structure, thematically, musically. It's them at the height of their music. Like, Diener lauds this as like his favorite album, and just thinking of, and he said so himself in that history, in that interview, is that musically and creatively they're like at their peak, and mentions the Mollusk as like such a brilliant song, and it really is. And one of the things that I love about the Mollusk, and this also extends to this whole album, is how Ween like constructs a mythology around their music. It's like you think about one of those like I don't know, like a Beatles Sgt. Pepper's poster, and there's like all these different people on it, and they all have some kind of relationship or something, and it's like, and you could do like a Bob Dylan poster where it's like the whole poster is like characters from like Bob Dylan songs. Well, you can do the same thing with Ween, and like and you talk about like the Boognish Rising and stuff like that, the Dwarf Man, Thy Will Be Done, and it's like, and something like the Mollusk is such a great example of that it's just like this mollusk, it's like this mythological like sort of mollusk rising, and it's like, so it's so brilliant, and like the call and response, it's just such a cool song, and it's nothing that they've really did before then. They're kind of in like uncharted territory with a lot of what they're trying to pull off on this album, and so I just think that's brilliant, and
right.
and that's totally like a song. Obviously it sets the flavor of that ocean theme, but speaking of this whole myth building, that's one of the amazing things that the Mollusk album does, is it kind of builds this whole like fictional narrative and world. You almost feel like you're in a like seaside town, like on an island country on the edge of the earth, like, and it's just like there's pirates, and there's just like, people like cannons firing, and people have hard times, and and it's just like a really gritty, rough life, but also it's like the beauty of the ocean, and,
Right.
And it's just like you can almost like envision, like you could like make like a movie based on the stories and the characters that are drawn up in the album, and so
Yeah. Well, one of the best things that you can do with a concept record, I think, is to have a varied sort of structure that maybe not every song is completely different from the last, but they're very different, and yet there's a theme that like flows through the whole album. So they have nailed it with this. And I think that's one of the reasons why, like I said earlier, the Mollusk just keeps coming up, and the Mollusk just keeps coming back among like alternative music and, alternative music fans, because it's like not only is it a great just album on its own, it's a great concept album. And just a lot of little things like the fact that, it starts with Dancing in the Show Tonight, and then at the end it has the Dancing in the Show Tonight reprise. So it's like just things like that are sort of like, okay, this is one whole piece of art here. This is one whole piece of music, and yet each part of it has its own sort of uniqueness and its own sort of like flavor. Those are like the best records.
You would light the candles in the room and invite your friends to sit down, and you would dim the lights and light the candles.
Yeah.
And you would listen to the Mollusk in its entirety.
Yeah,
together.
I mean, this is definitely...
And it would be an experience.
This is definitely way before the whole, like, iTunes and really breaking down, like, each individual, like, song is like, oh, okay, it's this band and this song. It's like, no. It is Ween, the Mollusk. It's a complete album. It harkens back to, like you said, the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, or like I think of like the Who's Tommy. You know what I mean? It's like just things that... Yes,
absolutely. I was actually just gonna say the Who.
Right. Like just those albums that just they don't let up. You know what I mean? It's like every song is something great. They're all kind of different. And yet, like I said, there's like a theme. There's like a flow. So those are always the best albums, and that's why it like holds up. That's why it holds up. It stands the test of time. Should we run down the whole track list?
Yeah, sure. I can read those off.
Okay.
So just give the song list, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about some of the songs, or all of the songs, or whatever. Anyway, they open with "I'm Dancing in the Show," the Mollusk, then "Polka Dot Tail," "I'll Be Your Johnny on the Spot," "Mutilated Lips," "The Blarney Stone," "It's Gonna Be All Right," "The Golden Eel," "Cold Blows the Wind," "Pink Eye," "On My Leg," which is an instrumental, "Waving My Dick in the Wind," "Buckingham Green," "Ocean Man," and "She Wanted to Leave." It's there's no like weak parts of this album, which is one of the awesome things about it, which just makes it stand out. Because even some things that you might think that are weak points, I think they just end up fitting the concept so well and the world building so well that they just fit right in, and they're awesome. And a perfect example of that is like the Blarney Stone.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ween kind of puts these like ribald songs like in every album, almost as like an FU, like put a middle finger up. But because like I was saying, it's like I could see it's like we're drinking a pint of like some really shitty mead, and like shots of whiskey on like a bar on a pier, and there's like storm, and like the ship's coming in, and like and I'm already there from this album. And like this whole nautical theme. And then the Blarney Stone just fits right in as like, that's that dirty, gritty side of the whole experience. And so it fits right in other words. It's also way more ribald and crude live.
Oh yeah.
So when you listen to it just from the album, it's not nearly as like offensive. Maybe we'll say, but like so much in it. Another one kind of like that is like Pink Eye. I used to think it was throwaway, but then it occurred to me like, and I want to get your thought on this, Shane. When I hear Pink Eye, you know what I totally think of? I think of Pink Floyd.
Okay, like,
I
could see that.
That totally makes me think of, and it's got to be on Metal. Is that the album where they just have those like kind of lazy instrumental tracks, dogs barking or like whatever?
Oh
like,
yeah, Seamus. Seamus was the dog. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. So they totally harken me back to Pink Floyd, and so I thought it was actually interesting because the article that Mickey mentions that the guy who does the artwork was like so enamored of Ween that they were like putting Ween up with like they were the next Floyd, they were the next Led Zeppelin, you know.
Well,
and it's crazy because I don't want to be like exaggerating my praise, but you know, it's like, you know, when I'm reading that and then I'm like, you know, this song totally harkens me back to like Pink Floyd,
Right.
you know, and like I totally get that, and then, like the whole concept idea of this, it's like, you know.
Well, the artist who does the cover for the Mollusk and like the Mollusk like promo album is I'm probably gonna butcher his last name, but it's Storm Thurgeson I don't know exactly how you say it, but he was basically sort of like Pink Floyd's like in-house artist. Like and this might be I don't know a ton about him, but I know that like starting with like Dark Side, everything like beyond that, I'm pretty sure with Pink Floyd is all him. You know what I mean? Like, I think you mentioned Metal, and actually I think Adam Hart Mother was done by him. So like he is like the Pink Floyd artist. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
like, and he is the one who did this particular album cover, you know, and that's really interesting reading that in this article too, is like he personally did that himself. I think there's other things that his name is attached to when it comes to music of this era, like, you know, the 90s and whatnot, but it's not really him. It's like his, like, you know, his like staff, his like,
he's got like a team of people underneath him.
Sure, right.
That, like,
right.
that do that, and he'll just like divvy it out.
But yeah, I mean, like when you talk about that particular artist, it's like, okay, boom, Pink Floyd. Like he's like associated with Pink Floyd, you know, like that sort of thing. But I could see that.
And you know, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I could see that when you mention Pink Eye. It's like, and those would be the two things that like, okay, are they quote unquote like skippable? It's like, you know, maybe if you're not in the mood for that kind of thing. What else were you gonna say?
Just that, you know, that's heady praise to be comparing them, but I also think about like the production that Ween is going through. You know, like,
oh yeah,
during the heady 90s, man, they were like pumping out music. And what bands compare to that? That are the Led Zeppelins and the Pink Floyds and the Beatles and the Stones of the world. Like, not that I'm trying to say that Ween should be like legendary like the Beatles, but just in terms of like of respect and like and how amazing they really are. It's like, man, those are the bands that like that in so many ways you like they're comparable to, you know.
right.
You know, and like, you know, and so, you know, and here's a concept album from a band who puts out fucking albums almost every year, you know, like at that time, you know, and it's like,
yeah. And the fact that Diener and Giner, you assume, but, you know, especially Diener, you know, he cares about stuff like the artwork. You know, he cares about it enough to be like, no, I want, you know, like a real artist. Like I want, you know, someone like him. And they got him. You know what I mean? So, like, when you talk about, you know, the 90s, it's like, okay, so the album was still in effect, you know, in the late 90s. It's before, you know, music had sort of broken up into just, like, individual tracks, you know, so bad. But, you know, at the time, it's like, okay, everything's on CD, everything is smaller, and there probably wasn't a lot of bands that were really putting in the effort in terms of, like, you know, stuff like that. You know what I mean? The art, you know, the front cover, you know, like, what's it going to be? It's got to be something cool, you know? So, like,
and it is
it's
cool,
good.
man.
It's good.
It is cool, and it's so Ween.
Oh, it's awesome, man. I mean, it's, you know, it's one of those sort of like iconic, you know, images. You know, like you said, it's like when you think about the mollusk, you think about that, you know, creature.
Yeah, and also any of the art apparently from the Mollusk era, like that all would have been associated with him.
Well, there isn't really a whole lot of other stuff. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But when I look at the track listing, I'm just looking at the whole thing here on Wikipedia. I realize that it's like, if not every song, it's like every other song has got like an amazing hook, like an amazing chorus. You know, it's like you got the Mollusk, you know, the song itself. Okay, amazing. I mean, come on. You got I'll Be Your Johnny on the Spot. You got Mutilated Lips. Even the Blarney Stone. You know, It's Gonna Be All Right. Well, now I'm just listing everything. But, like, it's like, if not every song, it's like at least every, like, other song has got an amazing chorus. You know, and just a catchy fucking line. You know what I mean? And it just doesn't let up. I mean, it's basically, it's like it's basically like every one, you know?
Like Mutilated Lips, I just love, like, the stream of consciousness feeling that has.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know, like, do any of the lyrics actually have a nautical theme? I don't think that even do. It harkens me back to, like, the Stallion and stuff, like, just the stream of consciousness of how the lyrics just keep going and building, and like you don't even know exactly where it's going. It's like quintessential like postmodern like writing, and it's awesome. I think this I keep coming back to this world building like that they do as part of the concept of this album, you know, and how like you really could like you could almost have like a musical of this and it could be on the stage, like when you mentioned The Who, that's like what I was thinking, like, you know, and like, so for example, when I'm saying that, like I'm Dancing in the Show is a great way to start an album, because it's almost like you're breaking the fourth wall to be like, we're a band and here we are, we're going to perform for you.
Yeah.
And Polka Dot Tail is, Mickey even says this, Diener says this in that article, is that's basically a children's song, and it is. And Polka Dot Tail is totally like something there's a song that I sing with my kids about polka dot tails.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like totally like it's one of those things where it's like a song, it doesn't have an artist, it's just it's a children's song, but it has an artist, it's Ween.
Right.
But that's what I mean with the world building, you know. And the same thing with like the Blarney Stone, you almost think that's just like a crude old like Irish folk tune, you know. That's just like
they nailed it.
This dirty song that the guys sing, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and then the same thing with Cold Blows the Wind, which actually happens to be a real, honest to God.
Yeah,
folk
I never knew that before.
Blew my mind when I learned that, because I did not know that.
Yeah, same here.
And that totally, to me, even makes it more awesome, because they're like building those influences and like they're reading and learning, and you know, it's just like that's the stuff you have to do as a great artist. And then also, She Wanted to Leave. She Wanted to Leave sounds like an old Irish ballad.
Yeah.
You know? And so my point is that all these songs like sound like they come like from the history, that they're not like Ween songs. They just sound like they're like, you know, sort of this land that they're describing, you know. And it's just really amazing, you know, because the concept that they're doing isn't like they're telling a story. So it's not like Tommy in that way.
Right.
There's no, you know, Pinball Wizard or anything like that. But like, but they're building this world, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a fantasy world with mythical mollusks, you know, that answer questions and like, you know, and whatnot like that. And so that's what I love about it. And like, and songs, like, they're at the height of their craft, because some of these songs are so mundane. Diener talks about how the golden eel was just like Aaron writing a song about how he would sit and watch the golden eel that his roommate had.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like very literal. It's like,
yeah, you
take a song from what you get. And again, like, that makes me think about like John Lennon telling stories about the Beatles, and like how they like, he's like bloke blimey, I was just reading, you know, in the newspaper, and it was about, you know, the halls and, you know, wherever, you know, right?
Yeah.
And he's just like, I just lifted all the lyrics from the newspaper I read that morning.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like the golden eel is just like, he's like, I'm gonna write a fucking song about this golden eel that I'm just staring at, and the song becomes like this myth building. It almost becomes like the golden eel. Like, I cannot reveal the golden eel.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, almost like it's, you know, it's very,
well,
escapes me at the moment.
And but, you know, you talk about
like Cthulhu. It's very like, who's the author for Cthulhu? I'm totally blanking on his name at the moment. I'm terrible. Anyway,
I don't know. Well, I mean, you want to talk about literal Ocean Man, which is basically just one line, just kind of like repeated, you know, like again and again.
It's
again.
The mandolin, man. The mandolin finds a place.
But
you know, this is great. The Ocean Man is like is that the original Man? Because Ween has a series of songs with like man, you know, like Fruit Man. You know, like, isn't there another one on La Cucaracha?
Yeah, it's a good.
And
we'll have
there's
to put
certainly
them all
fruit
together.
in the song Fruit Man. In the song Fruit Man, there certainly are a lot of man. But anyway, so Ocean Man is like the original man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. He's on vacation at this point. He's
and I'm just envisioning it's like a man who like, it's almost like, if in Pirates of the Caribbean Part 2, that the bad guys are all those like men that are half turned into like sea creatures.
Well, you know what
If there was one of those guys that was like a good guy, that's like who the Ocean Man is to me. Just like it's like it'd be a dude that's like, a humanoid guy with like a crustacean head. He's like, I'm the Ocean Man. I'm gonna dance with you on the beach.
Well, maybe it's the guy who starts off the beginning of the album, and then by the time it's over, he's an Ocean Man. Like he's a regular man at the beginning, and then by the end, he becomes the Ocean Man. That's kind of what when you're at the end of listening to this album, that's what you become. Well,
and I'm also kind of connecting that too with like how does that connect with things like the idea of like Greek and Roman mythology with like gods of the ocean,
right,
and the Ocean Man. And then she wanted to leave. That's I am an amateur guitarist for people out there that may or may not. I don't know if that's come up yet, but anyway, I play guitar and I play music and I write my own music and stuff and whatever. But like, She Wanted to Leave is one of the Ween songs that I like play. So like,
yeah,
it's one of my favorite Ween songs, and it's awesome. And it's like such a great, what a great song. It doesn't even sound like it just sounds like it's a song of all time, and it really transcends Ween. And when people are like, oh, they're just a goof band. Oh, is Ween just a goof band? And I'll be like, can you listen to fucking She Wanted to Leave?
Yeah,
please?
That's one of those songs that you just
tell me
lay
that
on.
They're a joke band.
Yeah.
How about It's Gonna Be All Right? How about It's Gonna Be All Right? How about Cold Blows the Wind? Are you gonna tell me that they're a joke band?
Right. Not with shit like this.
And another one that I love on this album, one of my high points, the Buckingham Green.
Absolutely.
Which
a Ween standard.
I would love to have this confirmed. So if anyone actually knows this, please give us a shout out. Or if anyone in the band ever actually like listens to this, give us a shout out. But like, Buckingham Green is like a little like village on the way to New Hope. And I've always assumed that somehow that's where the song comes from. I'm not sure that in that article that Diener really explains where Buckingham Green comes from. He mentions that they had Buckingham Green bouncing around from before. That it was left off of Chocolate and Cheese, which is an interesting thing to think about, that it actually fits so well on the Mollusk. And that's what Diener keeps coming back to on that article, is that like sometimes things wait for a reason, or sometimes things come around for a reason.
Right.
But anyway, so I am wondering like, how does the name of that little village and Buckingham Green, I don't remember the name of the streets. It's like, 3 routes that have 3 numbers each, like Route 662 and 362 or something. And I should have done the right research. It's like Bucks County, and it's just like a little village. And in particular, I know that there's just like a little like shopping plaza with like 5 little plaza shops.
Yeah.
They're like quaint. They're like quaint and little like cutesy. And there's probably like a bed and breakfast, and like it's just like little Buckingham Green.
Well, I just kind of remember.
I'm just wondering how that relates to the song.
Yeah.
But it's like, I love Buckingham Green. It's such an epic song. It typifies like a side of Ween that I love. It's just like this epicness that once again also kind of connects to Pink Floyd in a way. Like Pink Floyd, writes like these songs that are just really like, like Bring the Boys Back Home, dun, 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 like just really epic. And Ween does that. And Buckingham Green is like a great example of that. That it just feels so big.
Right,
like it just like makes you feel like you're in this big moment.
But yeah, for anybody in like another part of the country, if you've never been to New Hope, it's kind of like one of those things when you're on your way there, you come across Buckingham Green, like specifically what Rory is talking about is just like a little like shopping plaza, like a little like shopping village, like you're saying. It's and it's just the name of it, Buckingham Green. So when you're going past, you see the sign, and it's like, oh shit, must be getting close to New Hope, Buckingham Green. To me, I wonder if it wasn't something where they just saw that sign and just started like, oh, Buckingham Green. Oh, okay, that could, and just that's how it like started. You know, you never know.
What if there was a child without an eye, like in the parking lot? You know, making the mother cry. You know, like I want to know. I want answers.
Right.
I would love to know more about where that comes from.
On Buckingham Green.
But amazing song. I mean, you know, and so everything on this album just fits so well. You know, like, because even when you think like I'm dancing in the show, you could think that's throwaway, but it's like that's like a perfect way to start a show. You know, then that makes me think of like Pink Floyd and like The Wall. You know, right? How the Wall begins.
Yeah.
Right. Where he's like laying it out. Oh, we're having a show tonight.
Yeah.
This is obviously Ween, so it's going to be Ween style.
Right.
You know, and Polka Dot Tail like feels like it's like a children's story. Like we're at a little like, you know, one room, you know, schoolhouse, you know, and they're singing Polka Dot Tail.
Well, the thing that I love about Dancing the Show Tonight is it's a great way to kick off an album like this because, and this is one of the points I want to get to about like the entire album and, you know, like its longevity and everything. But it's like when you hear a track like that, it's like, you know, you're in like another place. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, and there again, it's like, okay, what's gonna kick off, you know, our new album? What's gonna like, you know, grab them and like, you know, punch them? You put on the Mollusk and you get Dancing in the Show Tonight, and it's like, what the fuck? You know, someone that doesn't already know about Ween or know that, you know, it's like an alternative band or, you know, whatever you want to call it. It's a different kind of music. You know, it's a different kind of thing. You know, that song is going to let you know that right off the bat. You know, this is not a normal record. You know, this is not your, like, pop songs. You know?
Yeah, totally.
This is different kind of shit. But it's still
I also love
cool.
the detail that that this was, like, one of the first songs that Glenn did when he, like, got with Diener and sort of joined the band. He's
totally.
Like, all right, I'm going to do Dancing in the Show.
Yeah, totally, man.
Laid that down.
So, like, that, you know, that's just one of the little things that I love is just, like, talk about bravado or whatever you want to call it. It's like, that is the first track on this album. You know what I mean? It's like, fuck, that's the kind of thing that, you know, could turn a lot of people off, you know, like, immediately. Just like, what the fuck is this, you know?
Yeah.
But it's so perfect, and that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about with like the album in general. Is it's like, okay, so maybe it wouldn't necessarily be the most like accessible to Ween. Is it the thing that you would give somebody who's never listened to Ween before? Is it the album that you would give somebody? Probably not. You know, it's probably, I think Rory would agree with me, we would say it would be White Pepper. You know, White Pepper is sort of like the most like it sounds great. It's very like high fidelity. There's no, you know, there's nothing like lo-fi about it. Not like there is with the Mollusk, but, you know, that was, I think, they're like at the peak of their like produced songs. You know, they're very friendly. They're very like accessible. Still, each track is a little different and everything. But the Mollusk, I think, is the best like alternative album. If you already know a little bit about Ween, you know that it's a different kind of experience. The Mollusk, I think, is the best one. If that makes sense.
Yeah, if you know what you're getting in, if you know a little bit about what you're getting into.
Yeah.
You know, whereas White Pepper is the one where it's like if you had someone you worked with, a work colleague that you didn't know that well, and so you didn't know what they were into, you'd share White Pepper. The Mollusk would be like what you would share with the guy who you know goes to like Flaming Lips shows and like Juggling Sun shows. You'd be like, awesome. All right, buddy, here's the Mollusk. You haven't heard Ween before, here's the Mollusk.
If anybody didn't catch that, Rory just made a Juggling Suns reference, which I love.
Yes, I will make those. I will make those. You know, every now and again. So write it down.
If you're not down with Juggling Suns, check them out.
Mark that shit.
But yeah, man, I mean, that to me is like the Mollusk. It's like, you know, it's the best like alternative rock like Ween album, if that is okay to say. And it
yeah, well, I mean, it's just like point blank. It's just like it's the best, or it's one of the two best albums. I mean, like so many people. Like if you did like preferential voting on Ween albums, and like everyone just ranked their Ween albums, like everyone might not agree that, and everyone might not say the Mollusk was number one, but like everyone's gonna have it near the top, and so it's gonna be like the number one album. I think when you're talking about fans of Ween, it's it's an amazing album, you know? It just has so many great songs. It's like, and so it deserves to be up there. And I know that Diener says it's his favorite. You know, I don't, it's hard for me to say like, oh, I'm going to narrow it down to one and say this is my favorite album of all time. But it's right up there, dude. Like, it's, you know, I mean, I definitely go back and forth with Chocolate and Cheese, and like I happen to really like the country album, which is interesting and you know, apropos to bring up because the country album came right before this, and so I think unfortunately a lot of people thought that the country album was almost like a joke, like a parody, and they didn't feel that way. They wanted to put together an amazing album, and I happen to think that it blows parody away. Like, it's so well done that it's like not parody. It's like a parody of a parody. It's so, you know, it's like, and so, but it's interesting, but I do think that kind of was almost like an Andy Kaufman moment for Ween, and then they follow up with the Mollusk, and people didn't know how to take it, and it was at like a moment in Weendom, and correct me if you don't agree, but like maybe that they had a little bit of an explosion of popularity with Chocolate and Cheese, where it was like, you know, they put out several videos, and like, you know, it's kind of like, ooh, wow, Ween. And then after Golden Country Greats, they sort of came back in a little bit just to the hard Ween fan base. And so like when you're talking about the Mollusk tour, it's like really appealing. It's like going introverted to appeal to the hardcore fans, and not being as like popular as they were with Chocolate and Cheese.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
they took a step back.
Yeah,
they took a step back in like popularity on the music scene, which is fine as far as like, hey, I don't give a crap who wants to listen to them or not. Like, I'm a fan, and if you're not, you're not. But it's also almost a shame because it is such a great album, and so its notoriety kind of got hurt in that way, because now it's almost like a cult thing where like Ryan mentioned the Riot Fest to me because Ween was doing the Mollusk, and Ryan is the first one to say that he's not really a big Ween fan, but that album really spoke to him. You know, and so I feel like unfortunately the Mollusk has almost attained like a cult status. Yeah. Where, you know, it's like could have been so much more popular than it is, but it's more like a cult thing. Although, won't you say, isn't Ocean Man, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that song in like a car commercial?
Well, I think Diener mentions that in that article, that like it wound up being Ocean Man that made him more money than anything, you know, else in terms of the, you know, what actually like wound up making the money. But you know, you bring up a couple of really good points there. I feel like the country album is so like ahead of its time, and you know, you're right. It's like, oh, okay, well, these guys are fucking crazy, and you know, blah blah blah. It's one of those things. I think both albums, I think, are one of those things where you have to sort of listen to it a few times until, you know, that sort of like parodiness that you mentioned sort of goes away. Same thing with Chocolate and Cheese. Maybe a little bit more Chocolate and Cheese, and then 12 Golden Country Greats. It's like the jokiness or the hokiness or whatever you want to call it. Like that sort of fades away after you listen to it, you know, 5-6 times or whatever. And you just realize, like, no, it's just fucking good. The Mollusk is sort of the first one where they haven't dropped the humor completely, but it's like, it's not a joke anymore. You know, and I think that, you know, that might have gotten a little lost at the time because it's just like, oh, these fucking guys are just fucking crazy. You know, you still had that sort of like reputation going around, you know, that like, just this crazy like alternative band and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, Diener talks about that in that article, that like, you know, the promotion and like the business side of like the Mollusk when it was released just sort of got like forgotten about. But there again, it's kind of like, isn't that like the best stuff? Isn't that really like the best art that is kind of like at the time is not really appreciated, but as time goes on, it will catch on and it will gain like its notoriety for being as good as it is. You know, isn't that always the best art? Really? You know what I mean? So like when you say it has a cult status, it's like it absolutely does. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it was such a unique album too. I mean, when you go just beyond Ween, Ween's a unique band, but like, there's no one else has like an album like this.
Right.
You know, it's like not even like it's not even like it's not even. I mean, Golden Country Greats was a genre of music, and that was country. This is like not a genre of music. This is like a way of being. You know, like.
Well, the one thing that we'll kind of like wrap it up a little bit, but the one thing that I will kind of say, you know, I hate to be critical, but you know, this is going to be kind of a pretentious Ween fan statement. Is, you know, like a couple of months ago when this was announced that they were going to play the Riot Fest in Chicago and they were going to play the entire Mollusk album, everyone's just going crazy. And at the time, it was the only live date on the calendar. Now, actually, as we're recording this, just today, they announced that they're going to play some dates of Halloween. So it's not the only dates
in Denver.
Yes, Denver. So it's not the only date that's on the calendar anymore. But the one thing I will say, again, maybe being a little bit more of like a pretentious Ween fan, is like I've seen them enough times that like I'm pretty sure I've seen everything from the Mollusk at least a few times. You know, the majority of them are played on a regular basis. There's a couple of them that are...
That's true. I'm looking at it right now, and
you know,
yeah, like Pink Eye isn't obviously, but like
yeah, I mean,
it wouldn't be. You could have shows that have almost every single other song.
Right. You know, so it's like I'm not saying it's not cool. It's like that's fucking cool and everything, and I don't know that they've ever done that before, is play the entire album, you know, from start to finish. So like that's really cool, but to me it's kind of like, okay, well, you know, I'd much rather see him do the whole thing of like fucking Pure Guava or something, because that would just be a fucking mind blower, you know what I mean? Like, or
yeah.
You know, so it's like, hey, it's cool, but it's kind of like I've seen them do those songs. You know, I you know, maybe not Pink Eye. I know I've seen Polka Dot Tail once or twice. You know, so those are the two that jump out at me as being, you know, kind of rare. You know, Cold Blows the Wind, maybe. So it's like I'm not, you know, not to be critical, but it's kind of like, okay, well, I've seen all those songs live. So it's like, you know, I'm curious to
cool.
listen to this when it happens and everything, but you know,
it's cool. I mean, it's like they're you know, it is what it is as far as like you've heard the songs before. It'd be cool to hear it as one performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's still cool. You know, I'm not trying to bring the mood down or anything like that, but it actually, you know, it actually just goes to show how amazing the album is, because, you know, we've mentioned it on our podcast before. It's like the standards of Ween. It really is. It you know, between this and like Chocolate and Cheese, you've got like the basis of the live show, I think. You know.
Yeah.
And maybe like
White Pepper,
you know,
those two albums commonly top the list for like most represented.
Right. And the other albums are the things that you're looking for. You know, I'd say like Chocolate and Cheese, The Mollusk, and White Pepper are like the basis of like the live show, and the other albums are the things that you're sort of like looking for, like, oh, that's from that, oh, that's from that, you know, that are sort of like sprinkled in here and there, you know, if that's
totally.
if that's fair. So unless you have anything else, Rory?
No, dude, I think that was decent. You know, we did all right. We took care of ourselves. No, it's just a fantastic album. And so it was cool to kind of go back and you know, again, it's stereogum.com, and it's the articles by a gentleman named Drew Fortune. And so just making sure we get our credits out there, that we're not stealing all our information. So that's a really good, so people should read that for themselves, because, you know, our whole point today wasn't to like just restate everything that he says in his story. So like there's a lot of cool information that you'll learn about like how the album gets made. And it was just cool. I was just happy to, like, you know, it's not the 20th anniversary anymore, but like, you know, the whole Riot Fest thing was an opportunity to be like, oh, the Mollusk, you know, and we had just recently did that podcast, so I thought it was a little bit of like fate, you know, that to come around. So
yeah,
so it was cool. Yeah, it was nice to kind of revisit the album. I don't listen to albums a lot anymore, to be honest. I listen to like the live shows a lot, and so to even just take the minute and be like, I'm taking 45 minutes and I'm listening to this album, like that was pretty cool to kind of turn back the clock and like and do it and think of it that way. You know, and that really did, like I mentioned earlier in this podcast, it really does take me back to like, it's like when you're like 20 years old and like college, you know, and it's just like burn the incense and turn the lights off and light the candles and like put the mollusk in, you know?
Well,
and then like you just like, yeah, you're all just like hanging out listening to it, no one's saying a freaking word. You know, it's like, you know, so that was fun to go down memory lane a little bit and like and break it down, man. A fantastic album and cool story behind how it was put together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely it definitely harkens back to a period, you know, like I said, before things sort of got so separated into just this is this track, this is that track, this is that, you know, from different things, or, you know, everything now seems to be just sort of like, oh, okay, it's a Ween mix. You know, it's a, you know, okay, you want to hear some Ween? Here's the best of Ween.
Yeah.
So totally. It's kind of like, you know, the whole thing of like an album is a little bit sort of like lost. Although I do have to say, with the resurgence and the popularity of vinyl records, it's definitely like coming back a little bit. You know what I mean? But it's sort of like the whole digital thing had sort of taken over in like the early 2000s, and that sort of got, you know, like lost a little bit. So it's nice to see, you know, the fact that they're playing the whole album gets a little bit of like the respect that it deserves, you know?
Well, dude, another thing worth mentioning, I know we're wrapping things up, but like as far as it being an album, like it is pretty tight and concise. Like,
yeah.
It's not as short as like a Beatles album, which, you know, the vinyl at the time meant you had to have like a 30-minute album. But a CD can hold like what, like 85 minutes or whatever, dude. And some of Ween's earlier albums, like The Pod and God, Ween, Satan and Pure Guava, are like 65 minutes, 70 minutes long, like 80 minutes long. Like, those are really long albums with a lot of content.
Yeah.
And so the Mollusk is very tight.
It's
you know,
tight,
like,
yeah.
and it's an album length. It's like 44 minutes long or so. It's an album length, you know, and it's a tight album. It's not just 20 songs from 1991 on an album.
Yeah. It doesn't really have anything that doesn't belong there. There is no, you know, there's no fat to be trimmed with the Mollusk.
Yes, it's not, you know, the Beatles' White Album, you know, like it's that's Quebec. This is not. This is, you know, much tighter.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put.
So yeah, dude. I mean, yeah, I don't have anything else to say.
Well, for those of you who may be listening to this podcast for the first time, hey man, write us a review. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, anywhere you get your podcasts, as the professionals say. So if you've enjoyed this, please let anyone you know who might want to listen to it about the show. We would really appreciate that.
Check out our other podcasts.
Yeah.
A lot of them end up being, a lot of them are us talking about old shows that we've been to.
Right.
But occasionally we go out and we kind of do other podcasts, like this one is just about an album. But yeah, check out our stuff.
Yeah, man.
Let us know what you think.
We have a couple of surprises in store.
Tell me about Buckingham Green.
Yeah. We have a couple of surprises in store for the near future. Maybe a couple of surprise guests that are not just friends of Rory and I. People that you may have heard of before, if you know what I'm talking about. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, we have some what might hopefully are some cool things in the mix. So
yeah.
Stay tuned and
so stay tuned. Hit us up on Twitter at WeenCastPodcast. Send us an email. WeenCastPodcast@gmail.com. So
comment on YouTube, babe.
Yeah.
Comment on YouTube.
Yeah, subscribe.
Comment on Facebook.
The YouTube is also WeenCast Podcast. So subscribe to the channel and hit us up with a comment. We love it. That's all I have.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, everybody. We out.